it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today's card is going to be a secret door card or a peekaboo door card, and these are super simple to create using the dies that you already have on hand. Now, of course, there are so many different options that we can take. I'm just going to show you some of them today, and hopefully it inspires you or gives you a little bit of inspiration to do something similar or something different. So I'm starting off today. I have this white card base that is going to go inside, and I'm going to use some craft cardstock that is going to be the outside of my card. Of course, these are personal preferences and you can do as you please from here. You could also have a white outer, you could have a black outer, you could have a colored cardstock outer. Anything is good. I use this Lawn Fawn craft coloured cardstock. It is a nice heavyweight for making a card base, and I'm going to make this a standard card base, which for me is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. So just give it a score, and then I have my outside card base ready to go. So from there, I do need to make my inside card base a little bit smaller. So for me, I like to have just a nice little even border around the outside, and I'm kind of here just measuring, how much I think I want that to be. So in my head, I'm aiming for around 1/4 inch. Of course, I'm only going to need to kind of take that off 3 sides because the inside, the spine side of the card is going to go hard in the middle. So you can see that 3 sides are going to have that nice border, and then the spine is going to tuck nicely into the other spine. So really not that complex. Now, I have these new stitched indented rectangles, and I absolutely love them. So in my head, I was thinking I would use these. Now, of course, any dies are going to work here. There are so many different options. You can use circles, squares, rectangles, stars, hearts. I mean, use what you have. But all you need is for it to kind of come off the edge a little bit. Now, I thought this could be a kind of fun design, and I thought I was going to go with this, but I just want to show you how I would kind of place it. So remember, it's not going to go in the middle like this. It has to come off the edge so that you can do some partial die cutting. So you could also use some stars, and I think this would be another great option. Make sure that at least one of the arms of the star, is that what you call it, is off the edge, if not 2 for stability. Or you could just use some hearts. Hearts are very common because they still look nice and even on the front of your page, and you can have that nice thick bit hanging off the edge to the left. So that's what I'm going to go with today, and I have the honeybee stacking hearts set, but of course you can use whatever you have. Stacking die sets are very, very handy. I have invested in some of the main shapes. I have these circles and rectangles, squares, hearts, and stars. Not all necessarily from the same company, but Hero Arts does some great ones. And I find when it comes to hearts in particular, there are no standard hearts. Hearts come in all different sort of shapes and sizes. So it definitely is personal preference as to whether you prefer, like a really slim one with the dip in the middle coming down really far, or more of a thicker, wider one. I mean, personal preference. So anyhow, I am using this one, and you want to do some partial die cutting. So I'm going to get the edge of my plates here and just go up to where I want it to cut, which is going to be the spine of my card. Run it through my die cutting machine with the card open, the card base open. And then when I take this out, I'm going to have the partial die cut that is going to be just cut up until the spine of the card. So this is where everything comes together, and from here again, there is so much personal preference involved, but this creates a fun little door coming off the front of our card. Now, because this is a little bit secret door or peekaboo, we do want to be peeking into something in the middle. So for me, I decided to use another stamp set, but I want to know where to place it. So I'm going to take a pencil and just draw through the peekaboo window, just so I roughly know. Now, I did do it really, really lightly. I can see it, and if I hold it up to the camera here, you'll be able to see where I've drawn it to. But I just draw it really, really lightly so that I can rub it out later on too, and you won't know it was there. Now, if you've watched my channel, you know that I love the Woodware Craft Collection stamps. These are big, beautiful, bold stamps with such a good price point. From the left here is Sunflower Rays, then Ditsy Daisy, then Summer Picks, and then Gardenia. And I have waited so long for them to release some more in this sort of style. So I picked up these 4. I know that they have more, and but this is just the ones that I thought would work well with my style and that I could picture being on cards. And so I was so excited to get these and use them. They've been out for a little bit, but they're just new to me in particular. Now I'm going to be using the Sunflower Rays today. This one is probably one of my favorites, and I am warning you, you're going to see this coming up in a fair few videos. I used the last set of my Woodware. In fact, I still have them. I cannot part with them. I absolutely love them, and I'm a big fan of their price point, the quality of the photopolymer, the stamps themselves, the designs. They are just gorgeous. So I'm not sponsored by the company. I do not get them free. I do not get them sent to me. Nothing of the above. I just purchase them like a normal person. I have to pay full price just like normal people, and I'm not in contact with the company at all. So I just absolutely love their stamps. Now I'm going to put in my little white card base. So I did tape it shut just so that it didn't pop up, even though I have a sticky grid mat. Of course, it's the card base, so it's got the front to it, and I'm just figuring out where I want it to go. Now, because this is a bit of a peekaboo card, of course I want you to be able to peek through and see the majority of the sunflower. So that's where the pencil guidelines come in handy, and I can see where it's mostly going to fit. Now, I guess I really don't need a stamping platform for this part at all, but I think it's just a comfort thing for me. I'm using some VersaFine Onyx black ink, which is just a beautiful crisp stamping black ink, and then I'm going to ink this up, stamp it down on the card. It pretty much fills most of the card front, to be honest, and again, this is one of the things that I love about these Woodware stamps, these big, gorgeous card front sized stamps, and they just have a really good price point for what they are. I absolutely love them. Now again, this is more of a comfort thing for me. I prefer, when I'm using this ink, to go over with some clear embossing powder. This just means that any of the colouring I'm going to do, no matter what I want to think of, is not going to smudge any lines. If I change my mind and use a different medium, it's going to be just fine. Now do remember that if you're using alcohol markers at this point, that it may go through depending on the cardstock that you're using and depending on if that bothers you on the inside. But for me today, I'm going to go back to one of my favorite techniques at the moment, because ever since I discovered these mini brushes, this is changing my style. I no longer have to cut masks out, and I can still do precision coloring. So this is something I am loving. Now, I pretty much just use one for each color family. I don't have one for each color. I don't even remotely have one for each color. So for all of these 3 colors, mustard seed, wild honey, and squeezed lemonade, I'm just using the same brush for all of them. So the squeezed lemonade for me is what's going to go on first. And I always like to have a little scrap piece of paper just underneath, and that way I can kind of dab down onto the scrap paper just to get off any of the real harsh ink when you just freshly ink it up, much like you would if you were ink blending. People often like to dab off first so that they don't get that big bold piece of ink when they first start. So the first layer for me is just the squeezed lemonade, and that's just kind of getting a base layer, getting a little bit of color, and then as you get darker down into the shadows and towards the center of the flower, that's where I'm going to use a little bit of the mustard seed, and I also kind of go into the shadows where some of the petals are crossing over each other and it would be slightly darker behind. So there is, I think in this package there is perhaps 3 different sizes of brushes. I just have the flat ones. You can also get an angular brush. I chose the flat ones and I haven't had any problems. I find that even if I need a bit of an angle or a really skinny line, I just sort of angle the brush a little bit more on its side and I can get that really fine line using the side of it. So depending on what you're after, but there are 3 or 4, I can't remember, a few sizes of brushes, and this is the smallest one, and it still covers a lot of distance, and even then I feel like I can get into all of these small areas, so the very tips of the petals and things, without having to do any masking at all. So I have been loving these, and I think these, for me, these were, as they say these days, a game changer. So I'm using some vintage photo in the center there, and then just flaring a little bit out of it, a little bit of it out into the sort of very, very base of the petals. And because we're using oxides, I can almost smudge it a little bit with my finger if need be too. And that just gets the center of the sunflowers all done. Then I'm going to come in quickly with a different brush. So this is kind of my greensy brush, if you like. And I'm going to just do a really light main coloring of Twisted Citron. And this is just going to be pretty much the base color. And I mean, I have sped up some of this. This here is in real time, but I did speed up some before. And I've sped it up again just in a minute. But it's really quick coloring, very quick. It means I don't have to cut out masks and things. You still will, obviously, if you want to do some techniques, you can still cut out masks, but for me, it just means I can color in individual pieces, little pieces, without having to do the masking. So that's really fun for me. As I said, this is just the base color. Then I'm going to move on to Mode Lawn, and that's where I'm going to add some of the kind of shadows and the darker colors just to give them a little bit of dimension. Now my coloring is nothing to write home about. I'm no artist. I've never done any classes or courses or anything. I've just learned from basically experience where some of the shadows should go, watching other people on YouTube, watching tutorials, just life, you know, and figuring out that, you know, this looks okay. It doesn't have to look perfect. Just add in a little bit of dark bits here and there, and I pretty much just wing it. But you use what you're comfortable with. You could use watercolors here. You could even make the inside portion of the card out of watercolor cardstock, and that would help too. This is just plain regular cardstock, and even then the oxides are going to blend nicely on it. I did think that I would come in with a little bit of Rustic Wilderness, but it ends up being pretty dark and I don't end up adding too much of it at all. So this was really quick and easy. The colouring altogether probably took me, I don't know, 7 to 8 minutes maybe, something like that. Not very long at all, and I think it looks okay to me, I think. But anyway, we have the inside of the card complete. So now, although I don't want to add too much to the outside of the card, I do want to add a little bit because it's pretty plain at the moment. So a nice easy option for me when I don't want to go too outrageous is to do a little bit of something tone on tone. And for me, this looks like using some clear sticky embossing ink. Now the one that I use is the Maker Fort embossing ink. I've been really loving this, using this for quite some time. I have just a domed foam blender to apply it, and yes, I did accidentally let glue dry on here one time, so I just kind of cut off the top layer. That's why the domed blender looks a bit chunky, but it still works perfectly fine. And this is just a nice easy way to apply it, and you can see you get this gorgeous tone on tone color that's going to dry exactly as you see it pretty much now. I am using the Tiles stencil by Tim Holtz. I just love the pattern. It's kind of nice and plain, adds a little bit of something, and I mainly come in around the edges. The nice thing is that I can kind of mask off these two and do them a little bit differently, and I'm doing, with the embossing ink, I'm doing a little bit of shading kind of around the outside of the heart just to highlight it. I really don't want to do too much at all. I just think the card is a nice bright surprise when you open up that little secret door, but other than that, I really, really love how this one turned out. To stick the card in the middle, I could use liquid glue, but my preference at the moment, and I'm enjoying using some double-sided tape. This one is the scrapbook.com tape. It is tearable, so you can tear the tape. It's not tearable tape, otherwise I wouldn't use it, but it is tearable tape. But if I'm trying to get really neat edges right up to the very, very edge of the card, I use my little scissors, and that way it kind of doesn't feel like the recipient, if they're opening it or playing with it a lot, that it's sort of two separate cards put together. I like it to go right to the very edges. Then for me, it's easier to put it in upside down because I am right-handed. Put it right in towards the center, and then you can see that gorgeous peekaboo when you open up the heart, and then of course you can write on the inside of the white part of the card. So I hope that you enjoyed this one today. Thank you so much for joining me. I will have links down below if you would like to support my channel, or if you would like to check out any of the supplies, even just have a closer look at them. I always appreciate that. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye.